What are human rights? Considering how often we use the term and how widely it seems to be understood, it can be surprisingly difficult to come up with a definition of human rights that satisfies everyone. A standard definition will generally say something like this: human rights are the rights that all people have simply because they're human. This is helpful because it makes the point that human rights are universal, but at the same time it leaves a lot to be desired, because the terms being defined are used in the definition. And that's never a very good idea. So perhaps we should define the two terms, human and rights, individually, before considering what they mean in combination. Let's start with rights. Rights are moral possessions, and in cases where the law recognizes their existence, they're legal possessions as well. They're possessions, even though intangible, in the sense that people, and for some rights other entities such as corporations or unions or nations, can claim ownership of rights. They can enjoy their rights, lay claim to them, and in some cases use or exercise them. Unlike other moral or legal possessions, rights have the curious effect of imposing duties on others. Philosophers, in fact, refer to this as the correlativity of rights and duties. The correlativity of rights and duties. If I have a right to collect $1,000 a month for the rest of my life, perhaps because I won the lottery or because I sold a valuable patent to someone with that as one of the terms of the contract, that right is meaningless unless another party has a duty to send me a check each month. If I have a right to practice my religion freely, then others around me will have the correlative duty not to interfere with my religious practices. And the correlative duty may go further, obliging the government to protect my church, synagogue, temple, or mosque from those who might want to burn it down. There's another element that goes along with rights: justification. A right is a moral or legal possession with some kind of backing. A moral right may be justified by reference to reason, nature, divine command, consent, or principles of justice, fairness, equality, or even utility. A legal right is justified more simply by reference to its emergence from an accepted lawmaking practice, the act of a legislature, a constitutional convention, or maybe a diplomatic conference. So a right is a moral or legal possession, and maybe both at the same time, that asserts something, makes a claim to something. And it's not just any kind of claim, it's a claim that comes with a justification, and it's a claim that imposes duties on others. There are many kinds of rights: contract rights, statutory rights, constitutional rights, and others. We differentiate among them based on the justification to which they appeal. So what is it that distinguishes some rights as human rights? Well, with human rights, the only justification one must appeal to is the justification inherent in being human. But the adjective human carries even more meaning. To call a right a human right is to say that it's an individual right. It belongs to every single individual in the world on an individualized basis. At the same time, to call a right a human right is to say it's universal. So there's a bit of a paradox inherent in this term human. It means both personal and universal at the same time. To call a right a human right is also to give it a special status. Human rights are at the top of a pyramid of rights. They stand in judgment of other rights. The absolute prohibition of slavery in international human rights law would supersede the contract rights that you might have when you make a contract with a transnational criminal organization to buy slaves to work in your sweatshop. Human rights are, in a sense, the highest form of rights, but they're also the last rights to be invoked. They are, in other words, rights of last resort. Finally, while there's some controversy about this, we ordinarily say that human rights impose their correlative duty on governments. In other words, Human rights are the rights designed to protect individuals. The lights just went out on me. To protect individual beings against governments that are all too often treating their people as means to an end. Human rights burst onto the scene in international affairs at a time when the atrocities committed by totalitarian regimes against their own citizens were fresh on the minds of the world's people. They were conceived to give every human being in the world a justifiable claim to life and dignity.